I was worried that AI was going to be my problem today, not audio. Yeah.
And snap my finger, and now
You go
the
a bit
handkerchief
later.
changed to the yellow. See, the white handkerchief changed to yellow and yellow. Watch this, and now it gets longer and longer and longer and longer. See, this is all mine. And as you can see, here's a purple and green, yellow and blue and red and blue and stop. Now let me ask a question. How many yellow boards you saw? If you say 12, you're correct. But did you notice that my orange t-shirt changed to lemon? And also the number was not in order at first, but now it's in order. If you miss it, check the video again. Alright!
Okay, so attention is limited, and did anyone see the lemon change of the numbers? It's so easy to miss, isn't it? I didn't get it at first either. But when you're so focused on one thing intently, you can miss the crucial information that's around you. And it happens all the time, right? And in a busy trading floor or in financial services, what do we miss if we're not looking for the lemons? And what impact does that make? So, you haven't walked into a YouTube watch party, don't worry, we're not watching YouTube for the whole of this. It is voice-driven AI agents for FDC3, and we're going to look at some of the natural interfaces for financial desktop integration. I'm Chris Watson, Head of Interoperability at Elgin, and for around 6 years I've been in the interoperability space, and I've witnessed a big challenge, and the challenge has been this. Multiple screens, multiple monitors, each promising to make things easier. Who has a setup like this? Come on, 12 monitors. And over time, we've had some very smart people, some are here today, look at the solutions for interoperability in the space. And everyone's platform was originally different, so we've got a lot of interoperability providers out there, all trying to wrangle those applications into a single space. So moving those UI into a cohesive desktop, allowing them to connect together, and that's great. But when they are so different, it makes it so hard for us to try and communicate in a standardized approach that actually we needed something else. And that was FDC3. So you've heard this probably throughout the conference today. It's the buzzword. Everyone always says FDC3. This should be the FDC3 conference. But it's not always roses. FDC3 has a bit of an intelligence dilemma. We have two approaches, particularly when it comes to what we say is intent. We have the user-driven single workflow approach, which is I do something and something happens. Or we can take a new approach, which is slightly more hard-coded on Rails, and an application can drive your workflow. But is that workflow exactly what the user wants, or is it the developer wants? And getting that fine balance is really hard at times. And the UI that presents itself to us for this is an intent resolver. Most of you will have seen intent resolvers before in some kind of capacity, often on one of these. So when you share something, let's say you open up your phone, you bring up an image, and then you decide to share it, you're going to pop up with, do you want to email it? Do you want to send it to your chat messages? And that's great, right? You send that through, it opens up, the other person's got it, perfect. And it works fine on a small screen. What happens when you bring this small piece of UI onto multiple monitors? Where do you think it goes? I'm looking here, I'm looking there, I'm looking everywhere for this tiny piece of UI. And the problem is that one-to-one workflow you just saw, when you start off, you have an intent resolver and then you have a result. I'm having to do that multiple times, and each time I might be over here on this screen, intent resolver pops up this screen. I might be on this screen, intent resolver pops up on this screen. It reminds me a bit like if you're a kid playing whack-a-mole every time trying to see this UI and get to the UI intent resolver. Now, along comes AI, and we were promised, yes, some Jarvis, Iron Man, and we were thinking, great. High pressure environment, this person's just talking to it, it's doing it, it's bringing everything up. But what we got was a bit of MSN Messenger 2.0. Everyone's seen it, ChatGPT is great, but let's be honest, the interface being a chatbot is not ideal, and it still steals our focus. You're having to type in, you move off, result comes through, type in, move off. It's not necessarily ideal for that. So, this is what we're hoping for. I'm sure some of you can identify this. Let's take a quick second, because I know it's after lunch. I'm going to give you a quick quiz. Who can name some of these? Anyone want to shout out? Top. Let's go for the top right. Anyone want to name this one? Yeah, Night Rider. Who was the AI assistant for that one? Kit. Perfect. I've already said this one. Say it again. Jarvis. Next one down. And who's the assistant? Star Trek? Computer. And the last one, does anyone want to get this really obscure one? Probably my favourite. Holly. Yeah, for those people, the Red Dwarf lovers out there, definitely my favourite. But let's be honest, that's what we see and that's what we want. Right? I want it. I don't know about you. So it's not just about that gimmicky approach, but actually we need to think about speed and performance of this. And the speed of thought versus the speed of fingers is actually really important, right? We've talked about that UI interface dragging you away, but speech has been something we've been doing for millennia. We've been talking to each other, we watch each other. When you type, you're not doing this. We wouldn't start a conversation on our phones and then trying to interact with each other. It just wouldn't necessarily work. We'd miss a whole bunch of things around us. So it's all right, last audience participation for the day. We're going to add a question, right? Get your brains going again. How long would it take us to speak, to type a 20-word command versus speak it? Now, that looks something like this. Show me Apple stock price chart and volume indicators and moving averages for the past 30 trading days. Not very long. Does anyone want to have a guess at how long that would take to type? Just random, in seconds. 10, 20, 30? Okay, what about speaking it? How long do you reckon it would take to speak it? 10, 5, okay, all right. So at 40 words per minute and at 150 words per minute, we're talking 30 seconds. And we're talking 8 seconds. That's quite a significant difference right there. And I've been inside of a lot of organisations where people go, we have a problem with speed. And what I'm going to do is shave up 100 milliseconds off my latency of my network. I'm going to change to a new programming language because it's quicker. But we all forget the problem actually stops when the other side of the computer, it's us as users, right? If the user interface is slow, we're slow. If we have to make us think, we're slow. We've only got a certain limit. Computers are growing exponentially. We have a certain limit to try and possess as much as possible. And that does have an impact on thinking about how we draw our attention. So each technology has its role. FDC3, definitely. Connecting all those applications, we don't disagree. But you wouldn't use it for the intelligence part we just said. AI chat. Okay, let's be honest here. Let's not get into the AGI intelligence bit. We're just going to call it intelligent for now. It's more intelligent than doing a on-the-rails workflow. And then voice, you're not going to have to look at it. You've got an idea. You can speak, and it brings fast attention to it. So, over the years, this has been kind of going through my brain, and we talked about it just. I've used Chrome API for this, and it was fine. But when you try and throw in some intelligence, it's always a little bit more difficult. And up until now, it's been really on the rails. I've had to do it a specific way. It's been more clunky. But add these three things together, and you get something slightly better.
Good afternoon, Vox.
Good afternoon. How can I assist you today?
Can you open my order management system for me?
Your order management system, OMS, is now open. Let me know if you'd like to place an order or need any other assistance with your portfolio.
Actually, yeah, I could do with opening my portfolio and seeing if I'm holding Microsoft.
You currently hold Microsoft MSFT in your portfolio across 2 accounts. Large cap growth, 800 shares at $342.10. Unrealized P&L plus $17,080. Small cap value, 800 shares at $342.10. Unrealized P&L plus $17,080. Would you like me to show more details about these positions or check another stock?
Can I get some news around Microsoft and just tell me some of the headlines if you can?
Here are the latest headlines from Microsoft, MSFT. 1. Resolve AI to join Russell 2000 registered trademark and Russell 3000 registered trademark indices following breakout year of hypergrowth and strategic alliances. 2. 10 reasons to buy and hold. This tech stock, Forever 3. Verosoft expands EAM innovation with launch of TAG, Mobi EAM for Microsoft Business Central. Would you like me to explore any of these stories further or check news for another company?
Actually, I just want some analysis, so some analytic tools for Microsoft, if possible, to dig deeper.
I've opened 5 analytical tools for Microsoft MSFT to provide comprehensive insights: news analysis, sentiment analysis, financials review, price chart, heat map analysis. These apps are now running in the background. Would you like me to check specific outputs from any of these tools or focus on one type of analysis in more detail?
No, I think that's great. That'll do for today. Thanks.
Because you always have to be polite to the AI.
You're welcome. All requested analysis tools are now active for Microsoft MSFT. Feel free to reach out anytime for updates or additional insights. Have a great day.
Okay, so let's break this down very briefly. There's a lot going on there. I know it doesn't look like your systems because we're not there yet with vendors, right? A lot of vendors do. I see Symphony in the room. They're FDC3 compliant, and there are some others. But in this instance, a couple of demo applications. What you are seeing is FDC3 SAIL, so the open source version, slightly modified, slightly older than the newer one. So if Rob's around, he's not here. Good. I didn't manage to get it working in the web version right now because I was upgrading at the time. But the flow itself is indicative of showing you that, look, I'm not having to bounce around, and we do need to add some additional things in here like wake words, etc. But ultimately, I'm doing all of this in a way that is very much conversational, right? But what you're seeing is this information is not coming from an API somewhere. It's coming from FDC3 compliant applications, right? That portfolio was able to return an intent. So I raised an intent, and what you'd normally see is the intent resolver pop-up. Didn't see a pop-up. It opened it up. It gave me some details, and it brought it back to me and was able to relay the information that it had. The same would be for anything else. Analysis was there. The news you heard, read it back to me. It was able to read back to me the information. And I didn't put it on there because I know it's dangerous, so I didn't try and put an order through because, let's be honest, everyone has their concerns about putting orders through this kind of stuff. But ultimately, the whole point is I didn't have to necessarily stop looking around in order to be able to do that. The visuals for us to see what's going on, to see it's actually working underneath, and there is a whole level of debug as well, so you can watch the log of tools coming through because this is actually calling some FDC3 tools. And it's discovering applications. So this application here, it does not know ahead of time. It did not know when I launched it, this application was there. It's going off, using the standard and saying, hey, I recognize this can be used with Microsoft, which just about see under here. I did in natural language. There's no context being sent here. And for those that are new to FDC3, context is the structure of data you send between applications so they understand how to interpret them. I did not make the context for this, and it was the AI made the context. It was able to use the tools I provided to send the context. And from there, it was able to pick the best application in order to be able to execute that. And that's happening through and through with all those things. So it's combining those three things really does make that flexible system. Remember we talked about the on Rails? I'm no longer, as a developer, having to think about going A, B, C, D. Oh, actually, user didn't want that. Now I've got to go back again. But I'm also able to use an interface that we like as humans to get to where I want to go to. So, how is it built? Like I said, speech to text, large language model, FDC3 agent, text to speech. I have used, for most of this, open source tools. I did cheat on one, I'm sorry, and I'll come to that. So, I'm using Whisper for speech to text. The delay you're seeing, by the way, for some of this stuff is actually inside of FDC3. I was running all of that on a local dev machine. None of it was production. So the speed between actually the speech and text was quick. The inference was quick there. So was the large language model. The FDC3 agent was the bit that took its time to try and work out, hey, I've sent something, can I get any information back? But here I'm using Quen for the large language model because it's small, it's quick. FDC3 agent, like I said, I'm using FDC3 SAIL, so open source there. Text-to-speech, I'm using 11 Labs. Yeah, I know, I did cheat a little bit there, but saying that, I have got a version of this that runs on device and is open source. So a lot of prompting. One thing I noticed that when you go through this, it does not know what an OMS is. It does not know what a PMS is. We've got a lot of acronyms inside of finance. We're going to have to work out how it understands that, right? And I think fine-tuning might be the way that we get to that, because a lot of prompts, it gets lost after a lot of time. And if you've got a lot of sequence of workflows, we're going to have to think about how that works. There is a lot of technology under the hood. So we are using REST, we're using WebSockets, we're using WebRTC. Speed for some of this. So those people that like the technology in the room, there are different mechanisms for different things. Particularly WebRTC is liked for the speech to text. Now, I have got some human in the loop here as well. So if I wanted to, let's say an application asked to open, MSN Messenger, right? It would go, I'm sorry, I can't find it. What else would you like to show me? Because that human in the loop's coming back and going, rather than saying, computer says no, I'm not doing anything, it says, what would you like to ask? And that's important because sometimes we don't necessarily want to do something, or we want to check beforehand. So like I said, an order is a good example. I send out an order. Do I know if it's right? Do I want to check beforehand? Should there be something in place for that? And we really need to think about how we put those stops in place and safeguards for it. There was a custom library in here. I have tried to use all different types of libraries for it. So LangGraph, LaraIndex, Vercel's AI language libraries. There are a lot of them out there, so many of them, but they didn't quite manage to get it how I wanted to. And unfortunately, I had to dig deeper and build some of these things and build the agentic framework from scratch. So I've covered some of these, and we've talked about some of them, how it's built, but ultimately, you need to think about when you build this, what choice you're going to take. And is it speed? Is it cost? Is it privacy? There's some great examples out there of stuff. And honestly, the commercial providers, they do a great job, right? They do. But we all have this problem about privacy of our data. Where's it going? Who handles it? What happens in that stuff? It's a question we need to think about, but there is a trade-off for it. The middle ground is great because we can use some fine-tuned models. We can use some open source models. But we've got to manage the infrastructure. You've got to have a team that understands it. And what does managing that look like when it's legacy? Let's be honest. Is anyone using ChatGPT, let alone ChatGPT3 right now? We're not really using them. Everyone's moved on. I use those as examples. I know people are using Claude, etc., and things like that. But no one's using the models they used last year. It's just not happening. Now, the last one is kind of my favorite at the moment. And this on-device and local machine, I know a lot of people are wanting to do it, but we all know it's power hungry on our machines, right? Do we have to have a beefer machine in order to be able to do that? Well, when you think about the models, a lot of them are quantized now to be able to drag them down to such a small size that they can run on things like Chrome. I have run this example, particularly with Whisper in Chrome, and it's, a little bit slow, but it's good enough that it worked faster than me typing it. So in the future, are we going to see more of this? I think that is the trend in that sense, because a lot of stuff recently, particularly Google I/O, showed that they're going to put it into the browser. And I've been beta testing the browser of Gemini for the last 8 months, and it's getting closer and closer each time. I had to have a slide of bullet points. So this is my slide of bullet points. We need some wake words. We're used to them. We say, hey, I'm not going to say them because everyone's phone's probably going to go off, but it's either the G1 or it's the S1, and we're used to doing that. To stop and start with the button is also attention dragging at the same time. We need to think about the background noise isolation where we work. That brings in privacy concerns as well, and potentially regulatory compliance we have to think about. How do we store this data? Where does it go? Who should have it? Speed, compression, stream responses to improve the delay. And unfortunately, the worst one is those people that don't talk properly. Yes, that's us Brummies out there, by the way. I am admitting that. It doesn't understand us sometimes, and it's not always accurate. But I think a hybrid approach might be the best way forward. Ultimately, is it faster? Yes. and there are ways we can improve it. Is it the future is the question. Now, historically shows in the pit we've already been using voice. We're used to it. We use phone, we use turrets, we use people like Symphony out there. Hey, Symphony team. But I'm not here to convince you, is it the right thing? The whole point is at the moment, our AI interfaces are, I don't think, good enough for the financial industry. We type in, they're attention grabbing. How do we improve that? I think that's a question for all of us in the room to answer. And is this a part of a solution? Maybe. Is there a better solution out there? Do we need to talk about it? Quite possibly. So voice is faster, but can still be quite error prone. AI agents do add some kind of semi-intelligence, so it's easier than being on the rails, but it's not quite as deterministic as an end user clicking and then able to get the response they require. Off-the-shelf solutions today, I don't think necessarily work. That's my opinion. That's after me trying for probably 18 months of different ways trying to get this working, and probably longer in the past. But using these open source tools has helped. And honestly, I think this one is me. Which big kid doesn't want their own AI assistant out there to talk to, right? It's just fun. I promise you I'll keep it short and sweet. Does anyone have any questions? Yep.
What was the sequence of events? What actually happened when you spoke into it?
Yeah.
You said that it didn't know anything about the apps,
Yeah.
the app directory, so I'm guessing something pulled down the app directory, something then said, a prompt then said, look through this.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk me through what
Yeah, sure. So for this specific one, I'm not going to go back all the way. What happened was when I asked it, so the voice was there, the input happened, the speech to text deciphered, hey, you've got this text input. The large language model had an idea of which tools it had access to. So it's going through iteratively, probably looking at, hey, I've got these tools. One of them would have been for that is, I can see there is an instrument here, some kind of financial instrument. That's got to be useful. What does the user want to do? What's their intent? So they want to open their portfolio. Great. Do I have access to something that's portfolio app-based out there? Yes, I've got a tool that can do that. And it did that by doing the find intent. So it goes and says, okay, well, I can do this. Which things can use that out there? Which applications? Pulls them down from the list, works out, hey, I know which one's right or close. And if it had multiple, by the way, that's where the human in the loop would ask, you've got 2 or 3 of these things, which one would you like to open? And then from there, passes it to FDC3, which does it on locally on the actual client side, executes the command, and then the response goes back in a either formatted approach for the large language model to continue on the process of doing more. So if I'd asked it a sequence of things, it would have continued the loop from a React pattern, if anyone's heard of that with an AI style. Or it would go off and it would say, okay, it's done. Let me give you a human version of the output that you can say to the user. So it's using a lot of tools ultimately underneath to do that.
And just add one more thing. So then it started talking about the Microsoft, right? As in it read out the 2 different
Yes.
held.
Yes.
That's context set by that.
Good question. No, yeah. So you're right. So the app inside of FDC3, there's an intent resolution. So the intent resolution can do one of 2 things. It can return a channel, so it can communicate via channels, or it can communicate via a data that you send back to it. It actually communicated in the portfolios example, data that's sent back. In the news example, it then made a call out to the API to get the headlines back, and then sent that back via the intent resolver. So it actually had a multiple hop communication point. Anyone else? Yeah.
So we've tried a couple of things in the past. We did things like Green Key and
Yep.
Google for voice to text. And typically what we found is that the translations, especially when you're looking at the sort of language that you'll often find in sales and trading and things like that,
Yes.
is not great.
Yep.
Now this is going back a few years, so I'm just wondering, has that progressed much recently?
Yes. So in terms of I hear you, and we were just talking. Sarah and I were talking about the issues where using Google API for voice. Most people don't realise, by the way, that's been in there for like 6 years. You can do speech to text. Speech to text. It will decipher it and come back, but it's not ideal, and it goes off to their servers. And it's proprietary, depending on the actual provider you use. So Google will use theirs, Microsoft will use theirs, and so on and so forth. I think with the newest models, and I use Whisper here, but there's actually a newer model that's actually even better just come out. It's able to understand you far better. Like I said, as a person that is probably difficult to understand, takes a lot to enunciate for me, and I'm quite a quick talker. It didn't miss a beat when I actually put things in. That's part of the problem. The second part is, okay, so you've got all this information. When you pass it into a large language model, how does it really understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve? And that's the other part. And I think that's where we talked about the fine-tuning of models. I think we're going to have to think about how models really understand the actual context of financial services. So you could do something like RAG, right? But it's just too slow in that process of going backwards and forwards. Long context windows are getting better and there's more of them. But I think if we're trying to get down to the quantized versions of models on machines, we're going to have to fine-tune them. There's no doubt. And I do think it's improved. That didn't do a lot. In terms of prompt, it wasn't huge. It was not long at all. And it didn't need to know what an order management system was. It doesn't still know what FDC3 is. Thinks it's a very weird acronym, but I don't blame it. So acronyms sometimes can be sketchy, but the words itself, it's quite good at working out what you should use. Hopefully that answers your question. Anyone else? Yeah?
I've got two questions. Is there a way, like in a text system, like especially a text system, to like add additional context for like maybe new words, like maybe like education, for example?
Yeah.
If you want us to add like a specific, maybe help them all to like understand newer words, is there a way to do that?
So I think if you're collecting maybe a log of them, depends if you're dynamically doing it. So like if you're collecting them as you go along, or if you're preset and there's like a whole. So education is a good example. I come from education, so I know the quango that ends up going inside of education language. I've also done something in education very similarly to this, and it's interesting because the acronyms themselves, there are definitely those approaches of, do we put it in the prompt? Do we try and do a retrieval from somewhere, database that tells us what that means and what that actually looks like? Or do we fine-tune the model? So I think there's the three approaches. When it comes to speaking, in terms of speech models, they're able to pick up what you're speaking most of the time and understand it, right? And I think the difference is maybe whether we decide whether we want to speak in the acronyms, but it'll pick up the acronyms. It works out when I say OMS. It works out when I say PMS. It will use those acronyms and send them in. It's then down to the large language model to work out what context am I using this in and how do I want to do the next steps for it. What was the second?
Yeah, so you said you use, I think it's like AI and stuff, like the speech to text. So what do you use for the text to speech image?
So I use text to speech for this one, 11 Labs, but there is a better open source version out there right now. But there's no one hosting that. And putting it into provision in terms of you, again, think about infrastructure, standing up with infrastructure itself is a big question alone, not just for large language models, but for speech models, text-to-speech models. You have to put them somewhere and you have to maintain it. So for ease in this sense, 11 Labs was probably the quickest. Or do you have a, yeah?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions and an observation. Just wondering, like we were discussing earlier, I've done some similar experiments using natural language-driven interfaces. And quite quickly, the conclusion I came to was it's great time saving. After a while, it also can be slightly annoying. Typing things all the time. So you want that sort of sweet spot of combination of, you know, and the speech text on top, but also the natural language input, plus next best actions, suggestions that you can just click on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've done experiments.
No, it's a really good question. So like you speak it in, then you rather than it coming back to you is like, hey, there's a visual UI that can do that. No, it's a great point actually. It's a really good thought, and actually one that probably should be again part of the solution to say, rather than putting it up, it is quicker. I will say one thing is the displaying of UI is faster than the speech being spoken back to us. So to display UI is faster, and having that blended mix of being able to say, I speak it in, I want you to push it out to me, that maybe it's an action-driven and not information-driven. So maybe there's two different differentiators there. Sometimes when we say, hey, give me the information for some news or something, or just give me a price, maybe being spoken to is good enough. Maybe it's, okay, I've done that, now where's my next action, would be a really good example and use case for bring me back some UI to click and go to the next action. So I haven't explored it, but it's a really good thought.
Yeah, I think it's obviously great for accessibility, but I think when you look at sort of dashboard type use cases, the benefits of text to speech are a bit less obvious.
Yeah.
In your demo, it's a great demo, by the way.
Thank you.
Having sort of the dashboard read out to you.
It's
feels sort of slower.
yes. No, I agree, and you probably all noticed that. So we were saying it feels slower when the portfolio is read out than actually me just reading it. And I think for an example, it's fine, but if you've got a long bit of context, the other thing I did notice and I played around with was when the information came back from the call to tools was to try to condense that down. So maybe it is too long, and you're saying often, I don't know if you're doing prompt engineering, you might say, I want a concise answer. Same thing could happen. You want an answer within the specific style. It would return in a specific style. So one of those was, when I originally did this, by the way, it was giving me a huge long answer, and I was like, I just want this to be really quick. Give me a sentence. Don't give me any more than a sentence because I'm busy and I'm focused. So to condense that down to a sentence was just a case of a bit of prompt engineering. It took a lot of prompt engineering, don't get me wrong, it was a lot of iterations, but the iterations finally came to where I wanted it to be. So yeah, I think that you're right, it does detract if you're not quite doing it in the way that you want to achieve the results. And this is, again, a proof of concept. If you do want to play around with it, just reach out to me and we can have a go at playing around with some of this stuff. It's interesting. That's the kind of stuff we're trying to do at Elgin White is reach into some of this stuff and hopefully get those integration levels working. And voice is just an interesting one that I found along the way. Does anyone else have any questions? Perfect. Well, hopefully it was light. I'm sorry it was sound issues at the beginning, but hopefully it was light and you enjoyed it enough to lunch. And thank you very much.